Hey everybody, David Nagel. You don't want to miss the episode on being bold, being great, being determined. Watch it now. I get one of the problems that we see that happens very frequently is a person does not know how to show up in authority for what they're doing. They lack the confidence, and because of that, they're always struggling with this idea of how do I get there? How do I move forward? How do I move my business forward? How do I move my finances forward? And when I first started my company, I would say, if you were to look on a sheet of paper and say, is this guy qualified to start this company, to run this company, to do whatever he's going to do? On paper, I would have to say no. I absolutely was not. There was nothing on paper that said that I could actually do this. However, not only was it not on paper, it was really not in my head either. All I had was a desire to really do something. Like I really wanted to start something. When I say something, I mean a business. I wasn't sure at first that this is what I was going to do. That came later down in the process, more close to when I actually decided to walk away from my job. But the training that I was getting at the time was very interesting in the fact that it really set up a foundational attitude for me to step into what I was doing with quite a bit of personal authority for what I was actually doing. Now here's what I'll say. We have a tremendous respect for qualifications. Is a person qualified? What makes them qualified to do what they're doing, be what they're doing, say what they're saying? And we've built a reputation over time, as individuals mature and grow in humanity, that we provide an educational system for people to become qualified at whatever they do. And that usually goes, different things go through rigorous studies. And what is the academic study that has to happen? Is the person intellectually capable of moving in that field or in that skill set, or in these types of things? And as the person is moving forward with their life, if they want to be something and they want to do something, they usually identify what it is. And then we want to know, what's the education that I need to get there? What are the skill sets that I need to develop? And then how much time is it going to take for me to become somewhat of an authority on something so that I'm well respected enough so that I can say I'm a success? And I didn't know that there was a way that you could shortcut that process. And I'm not talking shortcut the learning process. The learning process is what it is for almost everybody. Some people can learn quicker, some people slower, but there's a process that you have to go through. I had gone through a process of studying for 7 years. It was not an academic study in the sense that I went to a place of higher learning to learn what I learned. It was a self-study. It was a deep dive. It was listening to people that were experts in certain fields and doing the recommendations that they were giving me, studying the books that they told me to study, the programs that they told me to study, going to the seminars, listening to lectures, people talk, books on tape, that whole thing. And a lot of question and answer. So the more I studied, when I started studying, I had a tremendous amount of questions. And then when a lot of those questions were alleviated, it just caused more questions. So it was a period of back and forth questions, self-evaluation, introspection, learning about myself, learning about the world, really going after the different things that I believed in to see if they were solid. Because I think what I really wanted to know in the beginning was what the truth was. I mean, that was my search in life from a child. There were so many conflicting messages that I got as a kid. I really didn't know what the truth was. And there were some people that I was exposed to, and I think this is very relevant today, that because they say something bolder, they say something louder, they say something more aggressive, we take it as they have the truth. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have the truth. It just means that they are doing something in a way that is getting more attention than somebody else is. My mentor used to say, just because a person talks louder than anybody telling a lie doesn't make it true, right? It may make it heard more, and then people interpret it as the truth, or they want to make it true, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a truth. So I really wanted to get to the truth. And as I got to the truth and I started helping people, and they were getting really great results in life, I still had to overcome this idea of how do I take myself from, and this wasn't true either, so I was very self-depreciating back in the day. I was saying, how do I take myself from a truck driver to somebody that can be an author, a speaker, a coach, somebody who puts on seminars, who's well respected in the professional development field? Like, how do I make that transition? It was the question that went through my mind the first time that I saw Tony Robbins on stage. I remember the first seminar I went to. He came out, larger than life figure. He was very, very young back then, kind of dating myself. And very charismatic. The people that were in the environment with me were all very positive. And I thought for a brief second, like, fuck, it would be cool to do what he's doing. Like, that would be so cool. But also in my mind, if I gave it any thought at all, it was, well, how would I get from where I am to that? Like, that's never going to happen, right? So, and I'm sure I had ways of justifying it at the time. But needless to say, that was my thought process. Anyway, so I didn't really consider it, much at all. And it was only later that it came around that I then thinking to myself, okay, so how do I go from being a truck driver to this? Now, the truth was I needed to give myself some credit. I wasn't a truck driver anymore. I was very accomplished in what I was doing. I had been studying for a long period of time. I had changed myself immensely. And I just needed the confidence to take this extra step in life and really make something happen. And what I didn't understand at the time was that this was an attitude change. This was an attitude change from being timid, from being scared, from needing other people's permission, to literally creating a bold attitude and stepping into my own boldness and boldly going where no man has gone before, so to speak. So I learned this while I was studying in the latter days right before I started. I remember listening to a person who was putting on a seminar that was talking about different literature that's out there, and saying that everything that has been done, all the great achievements in life, were done by people who took bold action in moving forward. And I wasn't sure I knew what that meant, but as I began to dive into it, it was, not only was it like I'm all in, like all my chips are in, all my money's in, all my resources are in, I'm full out into everything that I'm doing. It's also how a person shows up in that situation. You can really sit down and you could say to yourself, how am I going to show up in this situation confidently? Now, it could be a situation that you've never showed up in before, but you can ask yourself the question, how can I be bold and confident in this situation? Not arrogant, but bold and confident. And then really think about what would a bold or confident person look like in this situation, and then show up in that situation. Now, why? Because the truth of the matter is that if you know what you're doing, if you're going to help someone else understand that you know what you're doing, you need to be a person of influence. You need to be a person who is bold, who is taking action, who is confident, who is sure of themselves in the direction that you're actually going. And you need to convey this message to other people. So I remember sitting down and literally constructing out on a sheet of paper what this would actually look like when I started my business, because I had basically no resources. Not extra resources. There was no funding. There was no capital funding in my business. I had to bootstrap it, which meant that I had to make money from day one. I had to hit the ground running from day one, right? So that meant that and I've said this before, the very weekend that I was learning how to do the very first seminar that I was going to do. I was also selling that seminar, putting butts in seats in the evening when I was done training during the day. And then I come home and I have to boldly step into a 3-day seminar, and I had never taught a 3-day seminar before, right? So you've got 3 days, basically 12 hours a day, and you're going to be teaching in-depth material for 12 hours for 3 days. So how do you do that, right? If you approach it from the person that you were, you're never going to become the person that you want to become. So I was sitting one time in a room. I was helping my mentor work an event. This is before I actually started my business. And he was always trying to give me tips. He was always trying to help me see how to do things differently. And we were talking about this. There was this speaking circuit thing that we were doing, but not we were doing. He was doing. I was just assisting. And he would come into the room and then he would leave. He'd only be there 5-10 minutes and then he would leave. And then maybe on later in the day, he would pop in and he'd be in there about 30 minutes. And, he'd say, what's going on? I would tell him what's going on. He would look around a little bit. If a couple of people approached him, he may say hi, and then he was gone. And I couldn't figure out what he was doing. There seemed to be some intention, some method to his madness. So I experienced that. And then I would experience him in various different scenarios over a period of years that I really started looking at, because one day he said to me, I asked him some question about, basically it was pertaining to becoming the person that I wanted to be. And he said, when you come to these seminars, are you still like learning the information? And I was like, oh yeah, it's great. I pay attention. I've got pages of notes. He said, but you had pages of notes at the last 10 seminars that you were at. And I'm like, yeah. He said, you know the information. Stop studying the information and start studying me. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll start studying you. Now, I'm thinking, well, why am I studying him? Oh, I'm studying him to see how he's showing up with this stuff. So it's not just paying attention to what he's doing, but asking the question, why is he doing what he was doing? And what I recognized was that he showed up to every situation in a very bold, confident way, but not arrogant. He didn't hang around long. There was almost an air of mystery around who he was, why he was there, what he was doing, how he interacted with people. And I thought to myself, this is absolutely fascinating, because the more he showed up this way, the more people would show up to him. And I remember the stories that he would tell within his seminars about how he started his business and what it was like to get his first gig and to do his first seminar and, all this stuff. And there was a thread that was running through this about how it was very bold, decisive action all the way. So it was all in at every level that he could possibly be in to be in. And it was constant persistence. So he acted like I remember telling me that his first brochures back in the 60s, he was like, they were state of the art for back in the 60s, whatever the hell that looked like. He's like, I didn't have an office. My office was my living room. He's like, but these brochures looked like I had the entire floor of a skyscraper. So it was about how the image that he was projecting for himself. And it wasn't that he wasn't successful. He was successful, but he was projecting what the corporate image saw as successful back in that day. So he was basically trying to tell me, like, listen, you've got to be all in everywhere. So you've got to look the part, be the part, act the part. Your subtle behavior needs to be the part. And over a process of watching and learning what he was doing, I realized that so much of the boldness that a person takes or does not take in the beginning of their endeavor really starts to determine the results that they get, whether they're actually getting fast results or they're not getting fast results. Now, this is very important. If a person is attempting to do something new and they're not getting results, It is the rare individual that will go a long time without getting results. I mean, we could always go back and talk about Edison with 10,000 tries, how he managed to persist 10,000 times with one invention before giving up is beyond what most people would consider even practical. What? Give it up already. How long are you going to keep going with this? I mean, this is crazy. It's not going to happen. 10,000 times you've tried this and you still don't have the friggin' light bulb? Like, come on, give it up. It doesn't even make sense anyway because there's no electricity in houses. Like, there's all this rationality about it. But he was extremely bold in the idea that he was putting everything in it. He's willing to go 10,000. He's probably willing to go whatever amount of time, but 100,000, a million tries before he gets it right because he is determined and decided that he's going to get it right. So if I want to do something, one of the best ways that I can put myself in great favor with what's going on is to really show up in a very bold way. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Let me tell you how I did this, and then you can see if you can relate this to what it is that you're doing. So when I first started my events, more than looking the part, because I really wasn't sure what looking the part meant. I mean, I was there, I was in a suit and tie, and, I looked professional and all that. But you can see somebody in a suit and tie and you can detect, weakness and insecurity as much as the opposite of it in a suit and tie. And it's not so much the suit and tie that does it, because you can see a person that's dressed in a sweatsuit and they can appear extremely confident. It's who's the person embodying in that suit and tie, in the action that they're doing, in the decision that they're actually making. So I thought to myself, okay, well, if I was already established at this, if I was on the same level of, say, a Bob Proctor or a Tony Robbins or a Brian Tracy or whoever, how would I show up to this phone call? How would I show up in this seminar? How would I walk in the room? How would I actually take the stage in a speaking engagement? How would I interact with people on calls? And then one that was even more important in a lot of cases was, who was I going to be when I was making sales? Like, how confident, how bold was I going to be? Because boldness shows up in, the cold call, your ability to get past the gatekeeper, to hold a person on the phone, to be able to ask for the price that you want, to influence somebody to make a good decision, the right decision, the decision that they want to make for themselves. When you're going to loan money, when you have to talk to bankers, when you have to talk to creditors, when you need to work with negotiation for hotels and travel. The people that get forward in life are the ones that take the bold actions to do so. So they're willing to go the extra step in order to get done what they want to get done. So I start to embody this right from the very beginning, and immediately it has a huge payoff. I'm making money. So I started making money right out of the gate. There's so many people that start to go down this road and they don't make money at all for a long period of time and they end up quitting. Even that idea was not good enough for me. I needed to make money right away, so I needed to have everything in this. There's a story that I've told over the years about a time when I was coming out of an event in Florida, and on my way to the airport, I find out there's a major snowstorm in Chicago. And I'm supposed to fly back to Chicago via Atlanta, and the story is that it's a major Midwest storm, and everything's going to be shut down. So I had this conversation with somebody who really challenged me on the idea that if I wanted to get home, I would get home regardless of the snowstorm. And part of it was that I had to be bold enough to ask and demand what I wanted. I'm sure that I ever told the story this way before. But the idea was this: when I got to Atlanta, sure as shit, everything was closed in the Midwest. Everything was closed in Atlanta. There was hardly any flights leaving Atlanta at all. And I thought, well, I'm going home, damn it, so I'm going to drive. And I went down to rent a car, and all the cars had been rented at that point. There were no cars available to drive back to Chicago. So I went back up to the ticket agent, and I said, excuse me, I had a flight, such and such, whatever, that was canceled to Chicago. And she's like, yeah, all the flights have been canceled. And I said, have all the flights actually been canceled? Are there any flights that are going to Chicago? And her response to me was, "Sir, all the flights are being canceled." And I said, "Well, you didn't even look at your computer. Would you look at your computer and see, are there any flights left that are actually going to Chicago today?" And she tried again. And I said, "Ma'am, I'm asking you just to look. I understand that you're telling me everything's canceled. Would you just look?" And she looked and she said, "Well, there's one flight at 9 o'clock tonight." And I said, "Great. Is there any open seats?" She said, "Sir, I'm telling you the flight will be canceled." She said, "Look at that board above me." Everything on there said canceled, 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 like all across, canceled. And I said, "Ma'am, are there any seats on that plane?" And she said, "There's one." I said, "Put me in the seat." She said, "If I take you out of, this was a Monday. They had put me on a plane to go back on Wednesday. I needed to get back today, okay? The reason why is not important, but I needed to get back for me. I needed to get back today." And she said, "If I take you out of this seat, you may not get one on Wednesday." She said, "Look around the airport." She's like, the whole airport is shut. Nothing's coming in, nothing's going out. All these people are stranded. They'll probably be here for a week. I said, "Please put me in that seat." She huffed, she puffed. She tried to talk me out of it again. I insisted. I'm being bold. I'm asking for what I want. I'm taking action, moving forward. I get a ticket for that seat. Now it's 9 o'clock in the morning. This flight's not till 9 o'clock in the evening. I have to hold this image in my mind for 12 frickin' hours to the detriment of everybody. I mean, you couldn't walk through Atlanta's airport back in this day without bumping into somebody who was not pissed off about the fact that they were not getting home anytime soon. So it was negative talk through the whole airport. Every bar I went in, every restaurant, every bookstore, every place I would sit down, people are talking negative. I would get up and move. I would get up and move here and there, holding the idea, like boldly holding the idea of what I want. I was determined, like I was not going to be denied my success. It was completely locked in emotionally. And long story short, 9 o'clock p.m. comes around. They're loading the plane. The flight attendants can't believe they're loading the plane. The ticket agents can't believe they're loading the plane. For sure, this is going to be canceled. The storm is just accelerating in Chicago. The pilots come on and say, "What's going on?" They're like, "Everybody's on the plane." They're like, "It's really going to go. It's going to go." We get on the plane. He says, "You're the first plane that's taken off for Chicago today." And before you know it, we're landing in Chicago. It was the only plane that got in. Never had an explanation as to why that plane was allowed to take off or land, but we got into Chicago that evening. The lessons that I learned from starting the business, through the sales that I needed to make, I could tell you story after story. I could stay here all day and tell you stories about other instances, just like the one with the Chicago snowstorm. Everything that I've learned in my life over the last 25 years has been to go after what you want boldly. That means with the confidence, the vision, the expectation, the persistence, the not willing to go back on what you say you're going to do or what you're going to have, and really as a forceful presence, not like an abusive force, but a force to be contended with. Like, I am a very determined person, very confident. I know what I want, and I'm going to get what I want, and I insist on getting what I want. Now, again, I'm throwing some other things in here because I don't know who's listening to this, and I don't want you to think like, "Oh, well, he's being an arrogant ass. He's going to throw a tantrum if he doesn't get what he wants." It's not that at all, right? It's not about I'm going to throw a tantrum if I don't get what I want. It's about really understanding the difference between people's mindset and the way they show up in life that hardly ever get what they want and struggle their whole life, to moving to an assuredness of your own capabilities and how the world works and how the universe works in order to get what you want. You understand that the only way to be is bold. And again, bold is not overtly aggressive. It's not arrogant. It's not bullying. It's strong. It's confident. It's influential. It's determined, and it's patient, meaning that you are 100% locked in to what it is that you're going to create in life. And you're going to do it in a bold way and a big way, meaning that whatever you do, you're not playing small. You're not playing not to lose. You're going to play to win. So it's not about cutting corners. It's not about cutting money. It's about, let's do this big and bold and see what the results are. Now, let's say you do something big and bold and you don't get good results. Are you going to associate that to big and bold? If you do, it's probably a big problem. You just probably had some misdirection somewhere in what you did. That's what you have to go back and look by. The world favors the bold person. The bold person gets what they want every single time. So the idea of showing up really big and bold in life is the key to overcoming mediocrity in your mind and actually getting a quick result with what it is that you want to do. Because you're being the person that you want to become. You're identifying who this person is. Now, I hesitate to use like the jargon, fake it till you make it, because I don't think it's fake, right? When you're becoming a better version of yourself, you have to act as the better version of yourself. The make it part is like when I don't have to think about it anymore, or when I have the result. But you can get the result for most things almost instantly. They may be a portion of the overall result, but you can get the result. But the key is that you really need to put the foot on the accelerator and show up in a big, bold way in order to get it. So the idea, think about this as I end this. What would your energy be like if you were coming from the place of, I will not be denied my success? Now, we got a lot of shit going on in the world right now, folks. A lot of shit. And there's a lot of energy going on in that shit. There's a lot of misdirection going on in that shit. There's a lot to get sucked into with that shit. You've got to maintain your boldness for the direction that you're going and what you want right now so that you don't get sucked into all of that stuff. Because the relaxed mind right now is the mind that is going to be susceptible to being sucked in by all the drama of everybody else. So make decisions big, make decisions bold, and completely follow through in a bold way to get the results that you want right now. See you on the next podcast. Hey, we just completed how to show up bold and big in your life to absolutely get the success that you want and to get it quicker than any other way. Let your friends know about it. Subscribe, ring the bell, whatever you want to call it, but continue to follow us. It's going to be a great time. Thanks.